Only a few years ago, I lost a close friend over politics. He was one of the smartest and most compassionate people I knew, but our views gradually drifted so far apart, the friendship became impossible to maintain. To him, my growing skepticism of modern immigration policy reflected a deeper moral failure. To me, I was simply asking questions that many people were reluctant to discuss. Consider this thought experiment. Imagine that over a course of a decade, 1 million East Asians settled across Ireland. They integrate well, work hard, start businesses, improve infrastructure, enrich Irish cuisine, and contribute to the economy. The country becomes wealthier, safer, and more internationally connected. Most people would see that as a success story. Yet, even in this optimistic scenario, Ireland would inevitably change. Schools, neighbourhoods, politics, and national traditions would all evolve as the population changed. New interests would emerge. Politicians would respond to new voting blocs, and culture That isn't necessarily an argument against immigration. It is simply an acknowledgement that large-scale demographic change has cultural consequences alongside economic benefits. Much too often, discussions about immigration focus solely on GDP, labour shortages, or the crime statistics. What happens when a nation's people change significantly over time? Nations are not defined only by institutions or borders. They are also shaped by shared history, customs, culture, and identity. Reasonable people can disagree about how much change is acceptable, but dismissing concerns about cultural continuity as automatically hateful prevents an honest debate. Immigration brings both benefits and trade-offs, and acknowledging both is essential if the conversation is to move beyond slogans. For years, I have found that conversations about mass immigration often focus almost exclusively on its benefits. We hear about economic growth, cultural enrichment, entrepreneurship, and the skills that newcomers bring. While I don't deny that these positives exist, I believe they are only one side of the equation. My aim is to highlight the cost that are too often dismissed or ignored. My argument is not that every immigrant is a problem, nor that immigration has no benefits. Rather, I believe that immigration on a very large scale can fundamentally reshape a country in ways that statistics alone cannot measure. Nations are more than economies. They are communities built on shared history, traditions, identity, and social trust. When demographic change happens rapidly, those foundations inevitably change. Many people assume that if immigration produces higher GDP, more restaurants, greater innovation, or a larger workforce, then it must be an unquestionable success. I solely disagree. Economic gains do not automatically outweigh the loss of cultural community. Economic gains do not automatically outweigh the loss of cultural continuity, social cohesion, or a shared sense of national identity. A country can, in fact, become wealthier while its people increasingly feel disconnected from the place that they once called home. This is why I choose to focus on the negative consequences of mass immigration. In my view, these costs receive far less attention than the benefits, despite having long-term implications for society. Changes to neighbourhoods, schools, political priorities, and national culture are often treated as insignificant or even celebrated. But many ordinary people experience them as a genuine loss. Their concerns deserve to be heard rather than dismissed as prejudice. Ultimately, I believe the drawbacks of sustained mass immigration outweigh its advantages. While immigration can deliver economic opportunities and enrich societies, those benefits cannot fully compensate for the gradual erosion of national identity and the cultural traditions that bind a people together. Prosperity alone is not enough if a nation loses the qualities that made it feel like home in the very first place. I do not expect everyone to agree with this conclusion, but I believe it is a legitimate perspective that deserves to be debated openly. A balanced discussion should acknowledge both the benefits and costs of immigration, rather than assuming that any concern about cultural change is inherently unreasonable. When Terry talks about the good old days, he is not dreaming of some far-right utopia, as liberal critics often suggest. He is remembering simplicity and stability, speaking to neighbours, leaving doors unlocked, children playing outside until dark. It is not a political extremism, but nostalgia for a more cohesive and familiar way of life. Britain's history with colonialism was both unfair and, in historical terms, transformative. Entire peoples were uprooted from deeply spiritual, tribal, and homogeneous societies and thrust into a machinery of modernity. They were expected to abandon old customs, adapt to foreign institutions, and assimilate into a system that may have seemed alien or even hostile to them. When imperial powers departed, many of those societies struggled to maintain the structures that had been imposed upon them, having been forced to modernize at a pace beyond their own development. Yet, the legacy of these events continues to dominate modern political discourse. Historical grievances remain a driving force behind many contemporary narratives. At the same time, non-Western societies have retained forms of masculinity, communal identity, and social cohesion that have largely disappeared from the modern Western world. I am not against mass immigration. Rather, I am for assimilation. Immigration brings many positives as long as there is a fundamental structure in place. Mass immigration is and has been welcome, the highlighting factor being that those from a compatible culture can integrate almost painlessly if cultural cohesion is encouraged. After all, the difference between integration and invasion is assimilation. Diversity is our strength. What a cute slogan, utterly meaningless, and more often than not, completely wrong. Multicultural empires tend to collapse hard. Austro-Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, the list goes on, and these were all similar cultures within the same religion. Things get so much worse the more different people are. Look at the current tensions in the UK. Do you call this a strength? It's becoming progressively worse. The West is expected to adopt this colourblind meritocracy. However, the rest of the world is looking out for their own in-group preferences. Unity and assimilation is our strength. You may find yourself hearing the phrase, mass immigration is unstoppable. This is inherently false. Mass immigration is only unstoppable because you make it so. Every single country that doesn't have a political elite hell-bent on destroying their own societies are able to control their borders perfectly fine. Border control is easy. Nations just refrain from letting their political powers enforce these laws. How is it that these so-called skilled people smugglers, doctors, and engineers get through?